Are we filming? You don't want me to like army roll or something and you like add it in? Okay. In this episode of Beyond at Home, we're going to answer one of the biggest objections Australians have to following Jesus, the problem of miracles. And to start, we have to begin with a question that maybe you've asked if you've had a problem with miracles. Yeah. Oh, was that as good as Riley's? Oh, that really hurt my feet. Are miracles even possible? If you're someone who's skeptical about Christianity or you're not sure where you sit on faith, maybe you've said like, Chris, miracles just don't happen. But here's the challenge with that. And maybe the reason that you say that is because you go, well, science shows that we can't have miracles. You know, the evidence that we have says that things like that just can't happen. But here's what you need to know about a statement like that. That's a philosophical statement, not a scientific statement. And here's what I mean by that. Is the purpose of science is to explain and understand, which means that if a scientist was to go into an experiment and already say that there was some explanations that were off the table, they wouldn't be truly doing science because they would have already explained away some of the conclusions they could possibly draw. See, to say that miracles aren't possible is to actually make a philosophical claim to say, hey, the way I'm going to do science is to straight away, before I've even observed the data, to say that something miraculous could not possibly happen. And that's not science, that's philosophy. See, miracles aren't contradictions of science, they lie outside the realm of science. And there's a whole bunch of things that lie outside the realm of science. Beauty, love, those are things you can't put in a test tube and measure. In fact, science can't tell us how to solve social justice issues. Science can't tell us how to solve racial equality or gender inequality. Science can't tell us how to solve the refugee crisis. There are a lot of things that lie outside the realm of science, which might lead us to say, well, Chris, okay, maybe miracles are possible, but surely they're improbable, right? Maybe you would say, Chris, look, I can get that miracles are possible, but surely they don't really happen that often. Let me give you an example to kind of help you think about this. Imagine you went around to everyone that you knew and you asked them, hey, have you won the lottery? Have you ever won the biggest jackpot in the lottery? And you kept going around to everyone. And you'd eventually gone around to say 5,000, 10,000 people. And every single answer was no. And then you finally got to someone and they said, hey, I have won the lotto. Well, your response to that could be, well, there's no chance because see, I've already interviewed 5,000 or 10,000 people, and all of them have said no. The probability of you winning the lottery is so low. Or you could say to them, well, what evidence do you have that you have won the lotto? See, just because the probability of something happening is low doesn't mean it hasn't happened. In fact, if you're kind of skeptical about faith, chances are you believe that the universe was created through the Big Bang. And the probability of that happening is so infinitesimally low. Yet scientists across the world believe that it happened. So just because the probability of something is low doesn't mean it didn't occur. Really what I'm getting at here is that miracles are not impossible and they're not improbable. So that leads us to the question, is there a meaning to the miracles that Jesus performed? When I've been talking about like when he turns the water into wine, I just want to make it like super dramatic so that people like kind of, do you reckon somehow we could just kind of like get out, call me out upon the waters where feet may fail kind of thing?
Yeah, right. Good. What happens if the tie comes in?
I'm fast.
You're fast.
I'm lightning fast. Are you fast? Now I want to show you the meaning of Jesus' miracles by taking you back to the very first miracle that Jesus ever did. And if you're new to faith, you might not know this, but the very first miracle that Jesus ever did was turn water into wine. Now you might be expecting me to be able to do that. I cannot. So let's move right along. Jesus' first miracle was to turn water into wine. But it wasn't as part of some street performance. It wasn't in some stadium in front of a crowd. It was actually at a wedding in Cana. And we can actually miss the power and the cultural hand grenade that would have went off when Jesus did this first miracle. So I want to give us right now a glimpse into what happened in that first miracle and the meaning behind it, because the meaning tells us everything. So Jesus was at this wedding with his disciples and his mother, and one of the worst things that could have possibly happened happens. The wine ran out. And everyone's running around frantically, and Jesus' mother turns to Jesus and she's like, hey, Jesus, they've run out of wine. And I just kind of imagine her being like, you get me? This is your time to step up. And Jesus' response to his mother is so odd. It's like, hey, not yet. My time hasn't come yet. And kind of like every single good mom, when your mom tells you, hey, clean your room, you're like, Mom, I'll do it tomorrow. And your mom's like, no, you know what you will do? You'll do it right now. Jesus' mom turns to the servants and says, just do whatever he tells you to. And so Jesus, what he tells the servants to do, he says, what I want you to do is I want you to get the 6 stone jars that were used for Jewish ceremonial washing, and I want you to fill the jars with water. And when the jars have been filled, here's what I want you to do. I want you to dip some of that out, and I want you to take it to the master of ceremonies or the host of the wedding. So the servants, they followed his instructions. And when the master of ceremonies tasted the water that was now wine, not knowing where it had come from, though of course the servants did, he called the bridegroom over. And this is what he said to the bridegroom. A host always serves the best wine first. Then when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the least expensive wine. But you have kept the best until now. Now, what we miss and why this would have been such a big deal to the first century audience, no one actually knew a miracle had taken place except for the servants. But the way in which it occurred is what Jesus had done is taken these Jewish ceremonial jars. And really these ceremonial jars were used for washing and preparation of a way of connecting with God. And when Jesus had used these jars to turn water into wine, effectively what he was doing is saying, God is doing something new. God is doing away with the old. This old Jewish way of connecting with God in these ceremonial washings, I am here to do something brand new in the world. Really what Jesus was saying in this miracle and in every subsequent miracle was that his miracles were about transformation. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Chris, that's all well and good, but what does that have to do with me in the 21st century? Does it even apply to me? Like, I'm watching this video on YouTube and they didn't even have electricity. Well, the tide's coming in, so let's walk and talk at the same time. In order to understand exactly what's going on, I want to highlight exactly what the master of ceremonies said. The host always serves the best wine first. But then he says this, when everyone has had a lot to drink, he brings out the less expensive wine. But you, talking to the host, you have saved the best until now. And you see John, who would have written this down, John never wastes words. And he always has this other meaning or this other theme floating through. And effectively what he was saying is that God hasn't done his best work yet. That God, when he steps into history with Jesus, was about to do something brand new. And the same is true in your life, and the same is true in my life. That the things in our lives that aren't quite working the way we'd wish, God isn't done with them yet. That God actually wants to transform and do a whole new thing in your life. So let me ask you a question. What is it in your life that needs transforming? Is it maybe your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your children? Is it the way that you respond to anger? Is it the fact that you really struggle to take on feedback because your ego is just so big that it hurts every single time someone makes a comment and you take it personally? Take a couple of minutes even, write it down, take a note, pause the video. What in your life needs transforming? Now, once you've got that thing in your life that you know needs transforming, let me ask you a really honest question. How's the transformation going? Maybe you're one of those people that's like, you know what, I wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and I journal in my journal for 4 hours and I have a cold shower and I just get better and better and better every single day. But maybe you're a little bit more like me. Maybe you kind of think to yourself, you know what, some days it's really, really good and some days it's not so great. In fact, some days I think that and some weeks and months, I think I'm doing so well only to realize that the thing that I thought was transforming, it was just simply a Band-Aid solution. So I want to challenge you if I can. Put what needs transforming in the hands of Jesus who wants to transform. You see, when Jesus stepped into history, he didn't do it so we could remain the same. He did it so we could be transformed. And I want to challenge you this week. Would you be courageous enough? Would you be bold enough to actually take the thing in your life that needs transforming? To take it to Jesus and say, hey, I'm not really sure how you're going to do this. I'm not really sure how you would do this, but I've just heard that you're a person that loves to transform things. So would you help me? Now, before you click out of this video, there's one thing I just want to say, particularly if you grew up in church. Maybe talking about miracles was commonplace. If you didn't grow up in church, I can't imagine that you sat around the dinner table and talked about the miraculous. But if you grew up in church and you talked about this stuff, there can be this tendency to ask the question, well, what about my miracle? Like, I prayed and they still died. I prayed and the opportunity didn't turn out. I prayed and they broke my heart. And if you've ever been in that position, here's something that I want you to know. Miracles aren't supposed to define our faith. And the reason they're not supposed to define our faith is because Jesus wasn't defined by his miracles. The miracles were simply a tool to point to what Jesus came in the world to do. In fact, sometimes some of the ways we can think about miracles is that they're a temporary fix. But think about this. Every single person that encountered a miracle by Jesus eventually went on to die. Because for Jesus, miracles were never about a temporary fix. Miracles were about transformation and pointing to the new that God was doing in the world. And you might say, well, that's all well and good, Chris, but still, why didn't God deliver on my miracle? And the reality is I can't answer that for you because I don't know the answer to that for you. But what I do know is Jesus felt exactly how you feel. Because right before he went to the cross, Jesus was sitting in a garden and he said, God, would you take away the suffering that I'm about to encounter? And God said no. And it was probably the greatest no in history. Because while the miracle didn't occur for Jesus, 3 days later, the grave was empty. And God had created a new way for you and I to have a relationship with him. So just because it feels like God hasn't come through, it doesn't mean that he's distant. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care. And it doesn't mean that he isn't doing something behind the scenes. So this week, continue to trust and place the thing that needs transforming into your life in the hands of the God that wants to transform. Because you never know what he's doing behind the scenes and how it might just transform your life. Hey, thanks so much for stopping by our channel. If you've liked the content here, why not give us a like or a subscribe and share this content with a friend. And we know that we probably couldn't answer all of the questions you have in this series. So down below, you'll find a link to our website where you can anonymously ask your questions about Jesus. And we're going to cover them in a bonus episode of the Beyond the Message podcast.